everyone. My name is Catherine Jelinek with the Skinny Platform, and I'm here today with Eric Larsen. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Catherine, for having me.
Yes, and we're here. You are an EOS implementer, and we're here to talk about and hear about your nugget. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the accountability chart is the one nugget the one piece that I wanted to talk about, and you know, back when I was trained a number of years ago, they talked about the accountability chart just being the root of all evil and the root of all good in the organization, and just to obsess over the accountability chart. And so, in our first full day with our clients, which we call a focus day, we spent a considerable amount of the time doing a lot of heavy lifting around the accountability chart, and we work on it for the next 60 days with the client to really just to kind of get it as close to perfection as we can. And my experience has been that leadership teams, they roll out the accountability chart, they get it going, and then there's just not a lot of obsession around the accountability chart as they go along in their journey. And so, we talk about this concept of hitting the ceiling as a leadership team, and one of those things you have to do is make sure you have the right structure, which really is the accountability chart. And my experience has been is that my clients, the companies that I work with, the ones that are growing, it's like a little bit of the nail in the head that they forget to, hey, let's look back. Do we have the right structure, the right accountability chart for the organization for the future? And so, as a team, you just have to always look back to say, do we have the right structure, or in other words, the right accountability chart that supports the goals, that supports the rocks, that supports our plan for this business? Because sometimes it doesn't. You've just outgrown the structure of the organization. And so I'm with a client, in a couple of weeks here, and that's what we're gonna spend a considerable amount of our day on is making sure we have the right structure, because they just kind of they've gone to the point as a company where they've hit a ceiling, and they've tried other things, but really we need to take a look at the structure to make sure, hey, is this the right leadership team? Do we have the right seats? Have we properly defined the roles? Or do we need to move things around to really propel and allow this business to get to the next level?
So that was going to be the question I'd ask is, how would you know if you don't have the right accountability chart? But you were mentioning a company you're working with has hit a ceiling. So that sounds like one of the indicators is when you're kind of repeatedly not progressing and finding yourself up against that wall. What else? What else is an indicator that
Yeah.
needs to change or it's not aligned right?
Sometimes they've changed the markets that they're playing in, or in different areas of business that they're in, and so that might require a change to their structure of the organization. I've seen some industry changes as well, where, hey, the industry has become more automated, and so they've just got to change the structure of how they support and manage the business. And I would say one other thing too is, Catherine, sometimes is that my experience has been, they tried other things. They've tried different people in the organization. They've tried to simplify the process. They've tried other things to delegate to other people, and it's just not working. And so sometimes it's like, all right, what else? What else is there? And we got to look at the structure to say, hey, do we have the right infrastructure to really take this to the next level? So those are a couple of the indicators that I've seen.
So say for the team that you're working with right now, when you realize, okay, we need to change our structure, what next? Like, what do you do what kind of discussion helps lead you to understand how to change it appropriately? How do you
So
get that clarity on what it should be?
yeah, it's a good question. And so, we take the approach. I take the approach. All right, we're the board of directors in this organization, and we're starting over. And so, what would the structure of this? If we could start with a blank piece of paper, you're the board of directors. Remove yourself from your role. You got to lift yourself up above the organization. What would the right structure of this organization look like if we were to start? If we were really to start from scratch? And so that's really starting with that mindset is just a good way to kind of move things.
That returning to first principles and wiping everything off and saying, okay, if we were to be new to this idea and not thinking about where I want to be or need to be,
Right.
what's really best for the company? How would we design this from the ground?
Yeah. What's the greater good of the organization? And with the reality being, some of you might not have a seat on the leadership team at the end of our time here today. You might still have a place in the organization, but you might not be here because it's not, the structure is different.
Yeah. Those are big
Yeah.
conversations
Yeah.
to have,
Yeah, they are.
scary to walk
Yeah, they're
into.
scary. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And
But it'll transform the organization. So
you're right. Speak to that side, like the positive when it is the way it's meant to be, like what does it look like then? What are the obvious positive outcomes of having the right accountability chart? How do the things flow from
Well,
there?
sometimes people are frustrated in their existing roles because it's just not the right structure to support the business. And so, we free them up to work on what, kind of what we, the unique ability, what they're really good at and what they love to do. And so sometimes, the position's outgrown them, or just there needs to be a change in how they look at that business. And so at the end of the day, sometimes they will be in a better position once we've made those changes in the organization.
Right. That each individual actually will be better off once things get clarified and aligned appropriately.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So with your teams that you have that you're helping now, do you have an example of one that is doing this well, that has that's really nailing their accountability chart? And can you give us some insight into the positive benefits that they're experiencing because of that?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking here to give an example. And I've got a client, and in manufacturing, and so they've gone back and forth on their accountability chart. And sometimes what I've seen is that one person, sits in multiple seats in that accountability chart. They're in the sales role, maybe they're in the operations role, and that's hard to do because you're split personality. You're trying to serve two different things, and it's not good for the team. It's not good for the organization overall. And so when they finally come to the realization, and they did come to the realization, hey, we've got to bring someone on in that sales seat that can really give the energy required to take this business, take this organization, take the sales to the next level. And when they did that, that's really what really helped get them really to drive sales, and really kind of get the person that was sitting in operations seat and sales seat focus on operations, which is what they really love to do. And they got someone else that could sit in that sales seat to just really focus on doing what they did.
Did they hire someone new?
They did hire someone new, which is not always the case, but in this case they hired someone from the outside that was a.
And they're doing much better now with people, like one person per accountability line. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, absolutely. One person per seat versus having or one person in one seat versus one person in multiple seats. It just creates additional clarity and alignment, and just really makes for a better life for them as well.
And can you define what the accountability chart is for anybody who listens that isn't steeped in
Yeah,
EO?
yeah, that good question. Accountability chart is really an org chart on steroids, and so we kind of remove some of the ego from it as well. And so we start with, we define what is the right structure of the organization, and whether it's what are the major seats at that leadership, starting with a leadership team level. We define what that seat is. For example, sales leader, operations leader, maybe a finance leader. We don't talk about titles because that's a different thing. That's for the outside world. And then we define what the five major roles, and this is kind of the key thing that separates an accountability chart from an org chart, is we define the five major roles. In other words, what are the major activities that you're doing in that seat? For example, a sales leader would be one of those things would be, holding their team accountable. So we call that lead, manage, and hold accountable. That's one of their major roles. It could be generating revenue. It could be customer service. It could be forecasting. But what are those major activities that they do on a regular basis? And we take that high level approach, and that way we make sure that there's nothing that gets dropped on the leadership team. Make who's responsible for revenue, who's responsible for customer service, who's responsible for forecasting, and there's not this all hands on deck approach, but we get clear on accountability.
That makes sense. Really clear on who's owning each activity and what activities really matter to that specific business.
Correct. Yep.
Great. So somebody who's just beginning this, maybe just beginning their EOS journey, what what's most important as they step into this and start critically thinking about their org chart that's now an accountability chart?
You've got to leave your ego at the door. I mean, you really do. You've got to be willing to take a different look at your business and realize that what got you here just might not get you to that next level. And that's probably why you're looking to run your business on EOS. But you've got to be willing to take a look and say, hey, we've got to think things differently, and be willing to make some of the necessary changes for the greater good of the organization. So that open mind is really, Catherine, is really that key.
I hear that. And it sounds like, too, that the accountability chart is something that stays for some time, but is never in a forever place. Like it might need to continue to evolve
Yeah, and
after a
that's
couple of years.
Yeah, that's really the point of like we can't get complacent with our accountability chart. Just like our scorecard or for our team might change over time. Hey, it's this is not measuring the right thing, or it's not getting us the results that I want, or the process needs to be updated because technology changes, tools change. Same thing with your accountability chart. The business changes, the market changes, AI comes into play, other things happen, market dynamics, and so it's the same thing. It's a living, breathing organism that needs to be really evaluated on a regular basis.
So here's a last question, perhaps, is how often or how do you recommend a team use their accountability chart? Is this something that's just baked into EOS and it's natural, a part of the process, or is there a recommendation as to how you integrate it and reflect on it that you have?
Yeah, good question. I mean, some clients I put it on their IDS list for them each quarter and just put accountability chart. And I just ask the question, is your accountability chart helping you get to where you need to be? And so it's a little bit, it can be as frequently as every quarter you're looking at it, or at minimum, once a year where we're taking a look at that to make sure it's the right structure for the organization. But it should definitely be on a regular basis. And anytime you add new people, obviously in the organization, it's got to be updated anyway. But a minimum once a year, and in some cases, we look at it every quarter for faster, more dynamic, growing organizations.
Wow. Thank you so much. This
Yeah,
is really insightful. I almost feel like it's an outfit or something that you need to continue to check if it still fits.
right. Yeah,
Something
absolutely,
something that needs to continue to change as a company grows, essentially.
absolutely, and it's just one of those things that we can get complacent on, but we've got to continue to look to make sure we're supporting the business and for the growth. Otherwise, you burn your people out, or you just you can't manage the growth that comes your way.
I want to ask one more question,
Sure.
and it's around the word you just said, complacent. So what are some warning signs to leave people with that there's some that they might be getting complacent with this?
One, if you ask the leadership team, hey, where can you somebody pull out a copy of the accountability chart, and they don't have it, they don't know where it is on the network, and so they
Yeah.
can't find it, or they pull it up and, oh, is this person still there? Well, they're not there. Oh, how come there's not the roles aren't defined for that person? Well, we haven't got to it yet. So it's just doing audits, or really I don't call it an audit, but just a spot check, just to say, hey, let's take a look at this, and just by asking those questions, you'll find out, or I found out, hey, maybe we need to do some work on this. What does the team think? And so that those are some ways that I've found to see if that accountability chart gets a little complacent.
All right. Well, this is great tips to battle complacency and create more alignment and accountability within the team. So thank you for bringing this nugget to light, Eric.
Well, thanks, Catherine, for having me here.
Yeah, take care.
All right.
This episode of the Podcast of Nuggets is presented by The Skinny Platform and is released in support of Freedom Reads, a national nonprofit opening handcrafted, curated 500-book libraries in prison cell blocks across America. Freedom libraries are more than just books. They are lifelines. They bring connection, hope, and dignity to prisons. Learn more at freedomreads.org. Freedom begins with a book.